Hey survivalists, Malcolm here with Survival Know-How, and today we're going to talk about the top 10 survival items under $10. Stay tuned. So I think there's this big misconception out there that prepping and survivalism, it's a very expensive hobby to get into. And yes, it absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be expensive, especially if you're just starting off. So just to prove this point, here's the top 10 items that I think every survivalist and prepper should have under $10. And I'll have links to all these items down in the description below if you guys want to find out more about them. So number one is a collapsible canteen. So I love these things. I think they've only really emerged on the market in the last few years, or at least I've only been aware of them the last few years. And essentially they're just there to store water, but when you don't need them, they collapse down and they weigh almost nothing. So let me just give you a quick scenario. So let's say you're in a bug out situation, you have your camp set up and you find a little pond or a lake and you have a source of water there. If you only have your one primary canteen, you can't get a whole lot of water back from that lake back to your camp so you can purify it. And that's where these really come in hand, right? You unfold them, you go there, you fill them up. Now you have maybe a gallon, 2 gallons of water that you can bring back to your camp to purify and use. So these things are essential for any prepper to have, I think, and actually incredibly useful just for any camper or hiker to have as well. So number 2 on the list is a yo-yo fishing reel. So these things are really cool and great in a long-term survival situation. So how they work, essentially you set them up with a hook and you pull the line out and you set it up in a tree. When a fish pulls on the hook, the spring activates and automatically reels it in. So you set it up, you walk away, come back a few hours, ideally you have a fish there waiting for you. So if you're prepping for a long-term sustainability or have a bug out bag, or if you're just camping and hiking and you want some protein and don't want to exert a lot of energy to get it, these yo-yo fishing reels are very cool and very practical and incredibly affordable at under $10. All right, so number 3 is cordage, right? I think everybody will agree that cordage is one of those essential items that every survivalist and prepper needs to have. And it is not that expensive at all, right? You don't even need a whole lot of cord, just some basic cordage. So obviously in the prepper community, a lot of people really like paracord, which again is incredibly affordable. Some people don't like it because knots tend to slip on it. It is kind of slippery and hard to get a grip. So I also see a lot of people using like jute cording, right? It really sinks its teeth into those knots so they don't come out. And you can also get bank line as another common cordage. But all 3 of those things you can easily find on Amazon for under $10. Number 5 is a first aid kit. So it's not the most exciting thing to buy, but it is essential that every prepper and survivalist has a good first aid kit. And really don't need to be all that extravagant and large. You really just need a basic first aid kit so that if you get a cut, you can protect that cut and keep it from getting infected further. That's really what the most common goal of a first aid kit is going to be. So basic first aid kits, you can absolutely find those for under $10. All right, so number 6 is a Ferro Rod, right? So a Ferro Rod is pretty basic source of fire. And the great thing about Ferro Rod is that you could probably literally start 1,000 fires with a Ferro Rod before it reaches its life expectancy. Really, if you're getting into prepping or camping or hiking or bug out bags, anything like that, you really want to have multiple sources of fire. So get a cheap Ferro Rod, have this one of your 3 or 4 sources of fire that you bring along with you. Number 7 are emergency candles. So I really like emergency candles. Out of all my preps, I've got a blackout bag, and I use that more than anything else. I lose power a couple times a year, and these emergency candles are great because you light them. Some of them literally last 12 hours, some of them last 7 hours, but they're designed to last a long time. So I think they're great for your home preps. I think they're good for an emergency vehicle bag, a blackout bag. You know, even having a few in your bug out bag might not be a bad idea. I definitely think emergency candles are a great buy. Number 8 is emergency thermal blankets. So these thermal blankets are fantastic at insulation, right? That's what they do. You wrap around it yourself and they keep the heat in. They reflect all your heat back in on you, and they're incredibly effective and incredibly lightweight, cheap, and small. So I really think these things go great in your emergency vehicle bag, in your bug out bag, at your home preps, right? In all these different situations, these little cheap, affordable thermal blankets are just fantastic at insulating you and keeping your heat close to your body. Number 9 is a crank flashlight. So I've definitely got plenty of flashlights around, but when you're looking at long-term sustainability, you don't want something that you have to worry about running out of batteries. You know, the worst case scenario is that you build your bug out bag, you don't use it for 2 years, you finally got to use it and your battery's dead. What do you do then? You know, you don't have that problem with a crank flashlight. Yeah, it is kind of a pain in the neck to crank it up, and it's not the brightest thing, but nonetheless, these crank flashlights are perfect for long-term sustainability, right? A good crank flashlight can last you months, maybe even years before it finally breaks down. Compare that to a small flashlight with 2 AA batteries in that. They may only last you a week. All right, so finally, the number 10 item in my list is a used copy of the SAS Survival Guide. So I know you guys have heard me harp on this guide before in my previous videos, but I still love it. I've read a lot of survival guides out there, and I really think this is the best overall guide that's out there. Yes, you should already know all the skills and all the techniques in this book, and you should practice them regularly. But when you're in a real survival situation, you're stressed out, you're dehydrated, you're starving, you may be injured, you're not always going to be thinking, your head is not always going to be in the right, proper place. So having all this information about building shelter, starting fire, about first aid, about foods that you can and cannot eat, about water purification, having all that information at your fingertips in a compact size like this is absolutely worth it and absolutely essential for any prepper and survivalist, in my opinion. So it's time for the question of the day. Out of these 10 items that I just listed off, how many of these do you already own? I'm really curious. Leave your answer down in the comment section below. I can absolutely tell you that I own all 10 of these items, and in fact, many of them I own 3 or 4 different versions of them.